The headline of the article is End the Fisa. And as a former assistant U.S. attorney, the Southern District of New York, and somebody who cares deeply about the threat of terrorism, and you want our law enforcement at the federal level to have great tools at their disposal, I was surprised. So tell me, why do we need to end the FISA?
Well, I've never liked FISA, and maybe this means more because I'm probably one of just a handful of prosecutors in America who actually use FISA evidence in criminal proceedings. Most FISA surveillance, the intelligence that you get from it, never sees the inside of a courtroom. It's government lawyers in the National Security Division at the Justice Department and FBI agents go to the secret court, and they get warrants which allow them to collect information which is used to build intelligence against foreign powers, at least in theory. But every now and then, if the intelligence yields some criminal behavior or criminal evidence, it can be used in criminal proceedings. So I actually got to use it in terrorism cases. That gave me an up-close look at it, Larry, and I must say I thought it was a crazy idea then, and it just it's clearer to me with each passing year that we should have figured out by now that national security is not a criminal justice problem. It's not a judicial problem. It's not fit for court resolution. That's not, I want to be clear about this. I am not saying that the executive branch should get carte blanche. Far from it. I don't think the court does an effective job of oversight. And to the extent that we've intruded the court into the process, I also don't think it has improved in any material way our civil rights. This is a political function, national security. It's meant for the political branches, and it should be overseen by Congress, not by the courts. And the last thing I'd say about it is, if you want to draw an important lesson from the Trump-Russia debacle, it is that the FBI and especially the Obama Justice Department at the beginning, they were only too happy to keep going to the FISA court with their applications for warrants against Carter Page based on this, what turns out to be fictional theory that there was a Trump-Russia espionage conspiracy. The thing they wouldn't do is bring their investigation and reveal their investigation to the Gang of Eight, which is the leadership in Congress of the two houses and their intelligence committees. And I think that says something. They knew where the hard questions would come from.
And in a way, if I can just add to that, Andrew McCarthy, having the court give this secret court give this seal of approval, this imprimatur on it, it sort of gives them this fig leaf. It also gives we the people this false sense that, well, somebody's watching to make sure nothing goes wrong. Clearly, they're not watching. They're relying on what they're told, these judges, number one. And number two, because of that, it makes the judiciary look bad. It makes us suspicious now of the courts, which is degrading to our trust in the system.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Larry. What did we hear for the better part of 2 years, right? Once we learned about the Carter Page surveillance, what we heard again and again and again was this had to be fine because 4 judges, all of them Republican appointees, signed off on these warrants. So what happens is the judges don't want to second-guess the national security agents because in our system, the courts actually don't have any responsibility for national security. That, again, is a political function. So the court feels tepid about second-guessing the national security professionals as they should, and they're apt to give them approval. And that's why there's such a high rate of approval of FISA warrant applications. And then what happens? The FBI goes to the court because they know they're going to get the warrant, almost certainly. And then they use the court authorization for the warrant as basically a judicial imprimatur on anything that they've done. So it's like their insurance policy, if that term isn't already overused.
No, I think it certainly applies. Andrew McCarthy is our guest. By the way, you have another great column this week, too. Schumer, the Supreme Court, and the Mob. You have very strong feelings about what Senator Schumer did there on the street in front of the Supreme Court. I'd love for you to discuss that, and also what I believe was a incredibly weak and deceitful attempt to explain himself yesterday in the well of the Senate.
Yeah, well, I feel strongly about it. I think for the same reason that most people feel strongly about it, which is I don't like to see anyone get threatened, but I particularly have a bad reaction to threatening remarks made against a court while a case is being argued to the mob. And what I think is most disheartening about this is the court brought a lot of this on itself by turning itself into a principally political institution, which it did a lot in its abortion jurisprudence. And the blunt fact, Larry, is that they call out the mob because it works. You know, we shouldn't have a situation where people think they can influence the outcomes of court cases, because jurisprudence is supposed to be a pretty clinical exercise of applying statutes and legal principles to factual scenarios. You know, I compared it in my column to, you know, what goes on with lab technicians. You know, somebody gets sick or they think they're sick and they get tests and they send those to the lab. You don't see anyone demonstrating outside the lab trying to influence the outcome of the technician's work, right? Well, the work of judges is supposed to be the same thing. No one is supposed to blame them for the way that a case comes out, because we're supposed to be, our understanding should be that they are in a very neutral, impartial way applying law to facts. But we all know that's not what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a chilling new advance, I think, in this the latest go around of how we're trying to outdo each other in terms of the rancor here. But this was absolutely a bridge too far. Is there any doubt that this calls for some kind of Senate punishment or correction here, some sort of statement from the United States Senate to say that this was completely unacceptable? What would you recommend?
Well, I think he should be censured. I don't, you know, there's a lot of people who say he should be prosecuted, and there's an effort underway to try to find, you know, statutes in the penal law that might help or might accomplish that. I don't really think going down that road is helpful. It looks political to begin with. There's also you'd have to litigate the issue of how far does his speech and debate immunity go under the Constitution. It would be you know, a long, extensive wrangle to no good end. But I think it would be helpful if the Senate stepped up to the plate and said this is absolutely unacceptable and shouldn't happen. I personally would like to see him stripped of his leadership position, but I don't look, Larry, I'm not like holding my breath waiting for any of this stuff to happen.
Yeah.
But I think it would be good if it did.
I think it would too. In the meantime, though, this is a political body, and politically, every Democrat who doesn't speak out, and I'm sad that there's a very small number who have spoken out against Senator Schumer, everyone that does not must answer for this and must be associated with it. That's how politics works. We got to leave it there. Always good to talk to you, Andrew McCarthy. You have a great weekend.
Thanks, Larry. You too.